Don't forget that you're listening to Nightmare. In the 1990s, I was a police officer for several years. Later, I had the opportunity to work in personal security for a low-profile businessman. And to this day, I continue in this peaceful job. However, during my time as a police officer, I experienced many intense situations, from watching fellow officers die in front of me, to facing organized crime in dangerous confrontations. Still, the most terrifying thing I remember had nothing to do with these earthly dangers that police face every day. I remember when we were alerted over the radio about the horrific murder of an entire family on a ranch just 20 minutes outside the city. Due to the magnitude of the event, many units responded, but by the time I arrived, the press and local ranchers were already there, kept at a distance by the authorities. I didn't even go inside to witness the horror within the house. It was enough to see the bodies of the parents and the young children being carried out, murdered in a way that was disturbingly cruel. I don't know if I had a bad feeling or if I was just overly sensitive, but the place had an oppressive vibe that weighed on my chest. I tried to stay as far away as possible. When my superior announced that a unit had to be present at all times until further orders, I silently prayed we wouldn't be assigned. But as if I had called it upon us, my partner Raul and I were chosen to begin the overnight guard. As the forensic teams and investigators left one by one and the other officers drove off, my anxiety only grew stronger with each minute. It got dark early that day. By 10 p.m., the area was completely engulfed in darkness and silence. Only the sounds of some animals, the wind, and occasionally cattle from the nearest ranch, a kilometer away, could be heard. Raul, my partner, approached the house despite my objections. "We shouldn't touch anything," I told him. "They'll probably come back tomorrow to continue the investigation." "I just want to turn on the porch light. The darkness is driving me crazy," he said. He walked over to the door, and from the outside, carefully reached in to find the switch. First, a light on the side of the house turned on. Then, another one lit up a window. I told him to stop and keep trying the others. He activated the next switch, and it lit up a window about a meter away, which seemed to belong to the living room. But when the light turned on, we could clearly see the figure of a woman pressed up against the window, her arms near her face, as if trying to look outside. We both screamed. Raul fell backwards onto the porch, and that thing ran away from the window, apparently retreating deeper into the house. We heard the footsteps moving away. In panic, Raul said, "Who is that? Another one?" He had just turned on the light that revealed someone was inside. I reported it over the radio. Someone was in the house. They told us to verify and proceed with caution. Another unit was already on its way to support us. I reported it almost automatically, maybe to feel less alone. But both Raul and I knew it was impossible for anyone to have been hiding there undetected. My hands felt frozen. I lit the inside with my flashlight, but the beam shook as much as I did. "We have to go in and check," said Raul. "I can't. I really can't," I replied. I understood his fear. Still, something inside me pushed me to enter. "Stay alert at the door," I told him. I drew my gun, though I knew it wouldn't help much, and stepped inside with my flashlight. None of the light switches worked anymore, so I had to explore the house in darkness, room by room, corner by corner, hoping to find the woman, or whatever it was. As soon as I crossed the threshold, horror and disgust took over me. There were bloodstains throughout the house. I remembered I had to be careful not to disturb the crime scene. I checked the place as best I could and approached what looked like a bedroom. As I passed the door, I felt something move inside. "Police! Is anyone there?" No answer. I entered slowly. It was a children's bedroom, completely torn apart. Everything was on the floor, thrown around. The window was open, and a faint breeze gently moved the curtains, as if something or someone had passed through moments ago, or was still inside. "6 years ago, when I was a child, I had one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, one that still makes me believe in the paranormal to this day. Although nothing as hard to explain has happened since, What I experienced that time is still etched in my mind. I accompanied my grandmother and her godmother, an elderly woman, to visit the tomb of her father. The cemetery, located on the outskirts of the city, had a melancholic air that felt familiar and even pleasant. I had never been there before, but the place evoked memories of family outings that, over time, had become impossible to repeat. I wasn't afraid of the tombs, so while they walked between the graves, I played and ran around without worrying too much. The morning was cloudy and the wind began to blow with a sound that resembled a lament. Something in the atmosphere changed, and a discomfort started to settle in my chest. I realized I had wandered too far and decided to return to my grandmother. But when I reached the spot where I had last seen her, she was no longer there. An irrational fear took over me. Being alone in a cemetery made me feel vulnerable, so I shouted her name, hoping for a response. After a moment of absolute silence, a voice called me from a distance. "Rodrigo, over here." I felt a little relieved, but I couldn't see her. I walked toward the voice, but my grandmother's figure only appeared fleetingly between the graves, always moving a bit farther away. When I finally saw her clearly, something made me doubt. She had her back to me, dressed in black, moving with slow steps. I hurried to reach her, but before I could get there, something made me stop dead in my tracks. My grandmother had always called me Tati, a nickname she had used since I was a baby, never my real name. Doubt flooded my mind, and then I noticed that the woman in front of me was wearing neglected and dirty clothes, something that didn't match the image of my grandmother, who always took care of every detail of her appearance. A chill ran down my spine, and I stood still, just 2 meters away. Something inside me told me that if I saw her face, I would never forget it. A paralyzing fear prevented me from moving as the old woman slowly turned toward me. Her face was a tangle of deep wrinkles that accentuated a malignant, inhuman expression. She was not like any old woman I had ever seen before. Her dark eyes glowed with a strange intensity, and a toothless smile spread across her face. Her skeletal arms reached toward me slowly, and although I wanted to run, my body refused to respond. I closed my eyes, hoping everything would disappear, but I felt bony fingers grip my shoulders with unexpected strength, pulling me toward her. Panic consumed me, and then, suddenly, I heard the firm voice of my godmother interrupting the moment with a calm but authoritative tone. "Excuse me if the boy's bothering you," my godmother said in a firm voice as she pulled me toward her. I opened my eyes and saw her standing between me and the woman in black. The old woman didn't react to her words. She didn't even seem to hear her. Her gaze remained fixed on me as if my godmother didn't exist. "Excuse us, we're leaving now," she insisted, and without giving me a chance to react, she started pulling me away with hurried steps, never looking back. As we moved away, I felt the woman in black still watching us, and a chill ran through my body. My godmother didn't stop holding me tightly, and I noticed her hands were trembling. Although I didn't understand it at the time, she was praying quietly, as if trying to protect me from something bigger than I could comprehend. At that moment, my grandmother's voice echoed in the distance, calling me by my nickname, Tati. My godmother and I ran toward her without stopping. When we met, my grandmother looked worried. "What happened? We couldn't find you, and we had to separate to look for you," she said anxiously. I tried to explain, but before I could say anything, my godmother interrupted with a warning. "This child must always be carefully watched and never left alone in these places." Her words stayed with me. We left the cemetery, and I never went back there again. Over time, my godmother became one of the most important people in my life, and only on the day of her wake did I dare to tell my grandmother what had really happened that morning. When she heard me, my grandmother cried silently and walked away to be alone for a moment in front of the coffin. When I was already in high school, I saw the woman in black again. It was on a minibus as we passed by an area near the cemetery. At one point, traffic slowed us down, and I looked out toward the sidewalk. And there she was, the same old woman, with the same inhuman expression, staring right at me. Panic overtook me, and I quickly changed seats to move away from the window. But just then, the minibus stopped to pick up a passenger. For a moment, I feared she would get on. When I gathered the courage to look again, I saw only a child boarding the vehicle. Since that day, I've lived with the constant fear of encountering that presence again. Years later, on Day of the Dead, my family and I returned to the cemetery to visit our departed loved ones. It was a tradition we truly enjoyed. That time, my sister-in-law and her son, Juanito, who was 4 years old back then, came along. Although they weren't used to celebrating the holiday that way, they showed genuine excitement. In the afternoon, Juanito began playing with other kids around the area, running between graves without a care. Everything seemed normal until, at the end of the day, we noticed that Juanito had stopped running and was now quietly talking to another boy, sharing his little toys. What seemed like innocent play took a strange turn when Juanito came over and told us that his little friend was hungry and asked if we could give him something to eat. The memory of that boy in the cemetery never truly faded. During a family gathering, my brother-in-law confessed that when Juanito was younger and still in kindergarten, he would often hear giggles and the sound of small footsteps running through the house. At first, he assumed it was normal, but over time, he began to notice that these sounds occurred when Juanito was asleep or when no one else was home. My sister-in-law had also sensed the strange presence, but they both chose to ignore it. That fear, however, became real the night some burglars tried to break into the house while my brother was away. That night, my sister-in-law was sleeping with her children when the barking of their dachshund woke her up. She looked out and saw a man holding the dog, trying to silence it, while another was climbing over the wall. Then she heard the front door being forced and knew they were breaking in. She grabbed the phone to call my brother while pushing a piece of furniture against the bedroom door to protect herself and the kids. Just then, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. She peeked through the window and saw the thieves fleeing in terror as the dog, now free, barked frantically at them. But the strangest part was when the dog turned back toward the house and wagged its tail, as if greeting someone she couldn't see. Terrified, my sister-in-law thought for a moment that my brother had come home and scared the burglars away. But when he finally answered the phone, he told her he was still far away and would be home in 5 minutes. Uncertainty filled her, but instead of staying in her room, she decided to go downstairs to make sure no one was there. Strangely, she didn't feel afraid, as if something was guiding her. In the dark hallway, she heard a child's laughter again, the same one she had heard during moments of solitude. She didn't know what to do. They never really figured out what happened that night. But after that, Juanito began mentioning his imaginary friend more and more often. The years went by and Juanito grew up, but he kept mentioning the child's presence in the house. According to him, the boy played with him and was always around. We never told him the truth about what my sister-in-law and I experienced at the cemetery that Day of the Dead. To him, his imaginary friend was always a harmless companion. But every time we heard him talking alone, a chill ran down our spines. Because deep down, we knew that child wasn't imaginary. Maybe he was the same one who asked for food that night. Or maybe something else that decided to stay with Juanito. To this day, even as an adult, he's never forgotten his invisible friend. I'm not someone particularly superstitious. I work at a tech company, have a background in systems, and in general, I'm skeptical of anything related to the paranormal. However, something changed when a relative from the countryside came to tell me a story that left me uneasy. I had never considered sharing it before, but I think this is the right place for it. Javier and Maria, the protagonists, are farmers raised in the old-fashioned way, living in a humble hut half an hour's ride from the nearest town. Javier, a distant cousin on my father's side, is a doctor, though his roots are as rural as many of our relatives. He told me the story himself during one of those rare visits we make on holidays. Going to his house always feels like a chore. The scenery is beautiful, yes, but the road is so primitive that it can only be accessed by horse or motorcycle. And in winter, not even that. During our last visit, we noticed something strange about Javier. His back was covered in scars. When I asked him what had happened, his answer left me frozen. I don't know if they told you in the village that I fell off the horse. Everyone says that. But Maria knows what really happened. His tone was serious, almost trembling. He didn't want to tell us anything, saying he didn't want to ruin our night. but it was clear that something was tormenting him. He avoided eye contact and tried to change the subject, but I insisted. I told him that a story couldn't hurt us, that I just wanted to hear it. Finally, he agreed. He asked me to sit next to him, taking advantage of the fact that the others were distracted. "I don't want your dad to get nervous driving back," he said. Then he took a deep breath, lowered his voice, and began. "2 months ago, as usual, I went to the village to buy things for the house." Javier continued, "I never leave too late because I don't want to be caught by the night on the way. I've never been afraid of the dark. I've always said I'm more afraid of the living than the dead, and I've been robbed before. But that afternoon I had 2 sick cows. I couldn't afford to lose them. I took the horse and prepared to go." Maria stopped me. "Where are you going? It's already late, Javier. I'm scared you'll go alone. The night will catch up with you. I have a bad feeling." But I couldn't wait. I took a lantern, even though I knew there would be a full moon. I didn't want to attract anyone's attention, so I didn't even plan on turning it on. I went as fast as I could. In the market, I bought everything, and on my way back, I ran into 2 friends. They offered me some rum. I couldn't say no. After the drinks, I continued on my way back. Just as expected, a black curtain fell over the field. The night grew dense. The horse knew the path better than I did, so I leaned forward, turned off the lantern, and let it guide me. I didn't want to reveal my position in case any bandits were lurking around. I was making good time. I figured I was halfway through the journey, and although the darkness was thick, I felt calmer. But just as I reached a curve near a stream, something made me brake suddenly. I saw a silhouette. I was almost sure it was a child. By then, my eyes had somewhat adjusted to the dark. I could make out shapes, but since I passed by quickly, I couldn't be sure. Still, doubt gnawed at me. What if it really was a lost child? What if she had been bitten by a snake, or was she just too scared to move? In these lands, if something happened to her, no one would hear her scream. I decided to turn around. I told myself that if it wasn't anything, at least I'd go back in peace. If it was a person, helping her was the right thing to do. I turned the horse around and approached slowly. As I got closer, I realized the figure wasn't moving, making no gestures, no sound. The horse began to get restless, snorting and shifting nervously. I patted its neck to calm it down, but its tension only grew. I then stopped about 5 meters from the figure. I could see better now. It looked like a child with her back to me, wearing a white dress. There was no sound, no crickets, no wind. A thick silence enveloped the surroundings. I thought about speaking to her, but something inside me resisted. A part of my instinct told me to leave immediately, that I shouldn't get any closer. Still, I wanted to be sure. "Are you okay?" I asked firmly. Nothing. Not a single movement. The horse neighed loudly and started to back away. That reaction froze my blood. I knew that animals could sense things that humans couldn't. Before I could say anything else, the figure turned its head. Not its whole body, just the head, as if it had no neck. What I saw made me step back immediately. It had no face, or at least not a human one. It was a dark blotch, as if its face were covered in shadow. I turned the horse around and made it run without looking back. I don't know how long I was riding. I just wanted to get away, to leave that place behind. When I got home, Maria was waiting for me at the door, worried. When she saw me, she paled. I got off the horse without saying a word. Maria led me inside. "What happened?" she asked repeatedly. I didn't know where to start. I felt like a fool, but I was also truly afraid. I told her what I had seen. Her face grew serious. She didn't hesitate. "I told you," she said softly. "Things happen here that we don't understand. You weren't the first to see it." I stayed silent. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair next to the bed, the lantern in my hand. I listened to every creak, every sound from the field, as if it could mean something. The next morning, Maria told me that several people in the village spoke of a girl who appears on that path. Some say she died years ago, run over by a cart. Others say she's the spirit of a girl who was never born. No one really knows. Since then, I avoid passing through that path after sunset. I'm not superstitious, but what I saw that night changed me. It's been hard to talk about it. Even now, when I repeat it, my skin crawls. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm telling it because it's real for me. Because that figure, that faceless girl, still appears in my dreams. I see her standing at the curve, unmoving, watching me. And when I wake up, I swear I can still smell the damp field in the pure fear I felt. Sometimes I believe she brought something with her, that a part of her came with me. Since that day, I sometimes notice the lights flickering for no reason, or dogs staring at a fixed point in the darkness. Maybe I'm just suggestible, but I can't help it. Something happened that night. Something that still follows me. So many thoughts flooded my mind that I decided to turn around and make sure of what I had seen. I took the horse, turned it around, and lit my lantern. I began to search, and in less than a minute, I couldn't see anything, even though I was sure I had traveled quite a distance. While I debated whether to return or not, I thought maybe the girl had walked or tried to follow me. She seemed about 7 years old, small, wearing a white dress. Her face was angelic, though part of it was covered by her hair. Honestly, I don't remember if I could see her feet. Maybe they were hidden in the grass. Also, when I turned on the lantern, I lost the little visibility I had again. I could only see what the light directly illuminated. "What happened?" I asked my cousin, my heart pounding. I couldn't stop listening to his story. "Are you lost?" I asked the girl. She simply nodded without saying a word. "Do you live nearby?" I insisted. This time she shook her head silently. "If you want, I'll take you to my house, and tomorrow we can look for your parents." "I don't want to leave you here alone." She nodded again without saying a word. I turned the horse and asked if she knew how to get on. I hadn't finished speaking when I already felt her behind me. She grabbed me tightly by the waist. I thought she must be terrified, so I didn't say anything else. I began to ride toward my home, with a knot in my stomach. At that moment, the temperature began to drop, as if the air had become denser. I accelerated as much as I could. The horse trotted with difficulty, but I was more afraid of encountering a bandit. It wasn't just my safety anymore. I had to protect that girl as well. My cousin paused at this point. His hands were trembling, and his gaze seemed lost, as if he were reliving the scene. "I noticed something wasn't right," he said. The horse started to slow down, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it back to its previous speed. I told the girl, "Don't be scared, we're almost there." And that's when I heard her speak for the first time. That voice still haunts me in my dreams. It didn't sound like a child's voice, nor like an adult's or an old person's voice. She said something that paralyzed me. "You're not going anywhere, you're coming with me." My cousin paused one last time. This time the tone of his voice changed. There was a strange calmness on his face. "Then I remembered my great-grandmother," he said. "She had a prayer that she would say when someone was sad or sick. I don't know how I remembered it. I was young when she died. It wasn't something I heard in church. It was like an old chant, very ancient." He recited it softly as if it were still lodged in his memory. When I finished saying it, I expected the worst. I thought she would laugh louder, but no, there was only silence. And then, with an annoyed tone, she said, "You're saved because that one works." At that moment, the pressure on the horse disappeared and it began to walk faster. Still, I could hear its breathing. It was exhausted. The pressure on my back was gone, but the pain remained. I'm sure fear had numbed me partially. When we got home, I didn't say anything. I got off the horse and locked myself inside. Maria looked at me confused. I didn't dare to speak, not yet. For days, my back hurt. When I checked myself in front of a mirror, I noticed marks as if I had been grabbed by claws. Since then, I haven't taken that path at night. No one can make me. Sometimes I dream of that voice, of those legs, and when I wake up, I can smell the sulfur again. The worst part is that deep down I know that someday, somehow, she will find me again. My cousin stood up from the bench where he had been sitting with me. His eyes were full of tears, though none fell. He remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. "Since that day, something changed here. Sometimes we hear footsteps on the roof or on the dry earth outside. But when I go out to look, there's no one." Maria has seen her too. She says she appears at the edge of the cornfield, that she's seen her standing among the stalks. She never approaches, she just watches. But she knows it's her. What shook me the most wasn't just his story, but the certainty with which he spoke. There was no hesitation. It didn't seem like he was making anything up. And to be honest, it didn't seem like he wanted to tell it, as if doing so would be to relive it. "And what happened next?" I asked. "Did you see her again?" My cousin shook his head, but then added, "I haven't seen her up close again, but I've felt her. Once, coming back from the corral, late at night, I heard that voice again, very softly, like a whisper. It was between the wind and the crickets, but it clearly said, "I'm waiting for you." At that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. We were in the kitchen of his house, but it felt as if we were deep in the woods. The night outside grew darker, or at least that's how it felt. Mary entered at that moment and stood silently, as if she knew exactly what we had been talking about. She just looked at us, sighed, and said, "Don't mention her again. Don't call her." That night, I couldn't sleep properly. Every little creak, every slight gust of wind against the windows made me jump. I've never been superstitious or religious, but something inside me knew that what I had heard wasn't just a rural tale. The next day, we said goodbye to Javier and Maria. My dad never found out what they had told me. I preferred to leave it like that, as part of that world that can't be explained but still exists. When we got in the car and started the journey back, I couldn't help but look out the window at the trees. I felt like something was watching me from a distance. I've never been able to forget that story. And since then, every time I travel to rural areas, I avoid being out at night. Because you never know what might be waiting at the curve by the stream. When I got home, the horse went straight to the corral, as if it knew its duty was done. Without thinking, I got off and went inside where Maria was waiting for me. She greeted me with a worried kiss, and I told her what had happened. We were both petrified. She looked at my back and told me I was burned, but it seemed like the burns were old, as if they had happened a long time ago. The marks were scars, not fresh wounds. That night, I think we only slept a couple of hours. The silence of the field felt denser, heavier. The air smelled strange, as if something was still there, waiting. As soon as dawn broke, I went out to check on the horse, and I found it lying down. It was dead. Its hind legs were completely charred, black as coal. The smell of sulfur still hung in the air, as if the night before hadn't quite ended. My cousin finished his story at that point. He stood up from the bench without saying another word and walked away. He left me alone, frozen, not knowing whether to believe him or think it was all just a hallucination. I didn't know what to say or what to think, but something in his face, and the way he spoke, made it impossible for me to dismiss it as a mere fantasy. That night, as we were heading back, it also got late. Although we were in the car, with the radio on and the whole family inside, I couldn't get the story out of my head. I didn't dare look out the window. Everything outside was darkness. The car lights only revealed a small piece of the road, as if something was swallowing the rest. And I didn't want to see if there was anything else in the darkness. I tried to convince myself it was just made up. Maybe a story enhanced by the rum, by the years spent in the countryside, by imagination. But when I looked up at the night sky, that thought vanished. It was full of stars, and the moon, fully round, looked strangely red. That image brought me back to the story. Unconsciously, I turned my head toward the window, and for a moment, I swear, I saw a figure standing among the trees, motionless, barely visible. There was no reason to stop or look any further. I just felt a chill run down my spine, one that I still remember. At that moment, the last question came to my mind. The prayer? What was it? Before we left, I had asked my cousin about it. He simply looked at me, serious, and replied, "It's no use telling you now." Whenever people ask me if I didn't fall asleep working night shifts, I always confidently said no. In fact, I found those hours the calmest. I knew they asked mostly because of safety concerns, but also because the city feels strange when it seems like no one is out and everyone's already home. I remember one time I got a ride request at a restaurant just behind the cathedral. I got as close as I could since some streets were closed and called the client to let them know where I was and ask if they could come to me. Even though the downtown was full of tourists, I love it, especially at night. Those dark, empty streets give me a sense of latent anxiety, like something bad is about to happen. While I waited, I saw someone approaching from behind, stumbling like a homeless person. It was one of those men who live off the spare change people give them. I made sure the car doors were locked and grabbed my pepper spray, just in case. As he was about to reach the car, the man let out a scream, and through the side mirror, I saw him run away until he disappeared down a nearby alley. When I turned my head to the right, I saw what had scared him. A tall man, around 6 feet 3 inches, 190 centimeters, almost completely covered by a cloak. He stared at me intensely. When he lifted the cloak, I could see he was wearing traditional pre-Hispanic indigenous clothing, like the kind used in folkloric dances. The sight completely unsettled me. No one performs those dances at that hour. The man's expression was calm, but his piercing eyes made me feel like maybe I owed him something. After a few seconds, he turned around and walked toward a nearby building. The strange thing was, as I watched him, I swear he walked right through the wall, like he could pass through it. Just then, someone tried to open my car door. It was the client and his girlfriend. They asked what was wrong, and I told them what I had just seen. I wasn't embarrassed to share. I just needed to let it out. I think they believed me, or at least thought something weird had happened, because I must have looked pale as a ghost. I still don't know what the hell I saw that night, but ever since then, I try to avoid downtown at that hour. It's a strange feeling that haunts me, like something is telling me I shouldn't be there. Sometime later, I started driving my friend's car at night to help us both with expenses. We were studying at the university, and night shifts worked well for me. Plus, I had fewer run-ins with the local taxi drivers, who are pretty aggressive toward Uber drivers. During the first few weeks, something pretty strange happened. I took a woman to a private neighborhood in a middle-class area, a quiet street in the city. I felt confident because the area seemed very peaceful. Right after I dropped her off, I got another ride nearby. I arrived, and the young man waiting at the door asked me to wait a minute while he went inside his house. I took the chance to circle to the end of the street. It had started to rain, and I thought maybe I should call it a night since I don't like driving in bad weather. A few minutes passed, and the guy didn't come back out. What caught my attention was a figure in the window of the house across the street. An elderly woman was staring at me intently. It started to make me uncomfortable. I figured maybe she was just one of those nosy neighbors who doesn't like seeing unfamiliar cars on her street at that hour. But something didn't add up. I saw how the woman opened her mouth in an impossible way, like her jaw completely unhinged. My eyes widened in shock, and when I looked again, she was gone. I got out of the car, confused, and then I saw her again, this time in a second-floor window. The woman was older, with long, gray, loose hair. I thought the noise had woken her up or something. I tried to greet her, saying I was just there to pick someone up, but she didn't react at all. As I spoke, I heard the young man come out of his house, and as the woman slowly closed the curtains, I felt even more unsettled. The young man approached me and asked what was going on with the neighbor, mentioning that the house had been empty for years. At that moment, I noticed that the grass was completely overgrown, and the front of the house looked dirty and neglected. It looked abandoned. The young man tried to stifle a laugh, and as he got into the car, he told me not to worry, that it was normal, but his tone seemed off. After dropping him off, I turned off the app and decided to call it a night. The feeling of unease lingered, and although I tried to shake it off, it clung to me. From time to time, I'd take advantage of holidays to drive for Uber again. On one occasion, I headed toward a big concert, expecting it to end soon, but just as I parked, another ride request came in. I was surprised it wasn't near the venue, but just 3 minutes away, in a quiet residential area with no bars or events. Surge pricing was active, and honestly, that was all I cared about. But something about this new street unsettled me. I was used to the city's traffic at that hour, but there was something strange about this area. As I drove there, a weird feeling came over me again. Like I didn't recognize the streets, like I was being watched. A growing sense that something was wrong made me start to think I might have to make a decision soon. Keep working night shifts, or find another way to earn. When I got the notification, I headed quickly to the pickup spot. There was a well-dressed, heavy-set man waiting, sweating profusely. "Drive as fast as you can, please," he said as he got into the car. I tried to stay calm, obeying the traffic rules. I knew any fines would be on me. Soon, we took a road that helped us escape all the traffic, and the man seemed to relax a bit. "We're good now, don't worry," I said as we picked up speed. He was absorbed in his phone, but suddenly shouted, alarmed, "Look! Look! Look ahead!" I thought we were about to crash into something, but there was nothing. Still, as we passed, I saw the silhouette of a woman standing on the side of the road, near the slow lane. I stopped and asked the man if she was okay. "No, no, no. What are you doing? Let's get out of here," he said, grabbing my shoulder tightly. His voice was calm, but carried a clear desperation. When I looked at him, his face was pale, sweating again, and there was unmistakable fear in his eyes. Before I could process what was happening, I turned to look behind us and saw something floating toward the car. An unearthly scream filled the cabin, and before I even finished buckling my seatbelt, I slammed on the gas. The sight of that floating woman coming toward us was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and I know I'll never forget it. "Don't tell anyone, man," the man said as we reached the airport. "If it weren't for this flight, I'd have asked you to take me to the hospital. I feel like my heart is about to burst." He jumped out of the car and disappeared into the crowd. What struck me as even stranger was how indifferent everyone at the airport seemed. They were all so busy with their own problems, trying not to miss their flights, that no one noticed I had just experienced something terrifying. I stood there, trying to look as normal as possible, while the man's words echoed in my mind. "Don't tell anyone." But I knew what I'd seen wasn't just a hallucination or something explainable. It wasn't the first time I'd encountered something paranormal during night shifts, but I always tried to carry on, because work had to be done and money had to be made. Still, the fear I felt that night would never leave me. Despite everything, I kept driving, unaware that the next night would bring an even more terrifying experience. A few months later, I got a long ride, one of those trips that seemed like the last one of the night. I picked up a group of people near a financial district, and they asked me to take them to a neighborhood on the outskirts, all the way across the city. I hesitated for a moment since I was already tired and had been hoping for a short trip. But in the end, I decided it would be a good way to close out the day, even if I got home much later. I had no idea I'd come back from that trip with something far more terrifying than I could have imagined. As we were driving through a curve on the highway, a silhouette suddenly crossed in front of us, forcing me to swerve sharply. The passengers were clearly upset and gave me sharp looks. I apologized. Just about 400 meters ahead, I saw something else, clearer this time. It was a little girl standing in the middle of the highway, right in the fast lane. I changed lanes instinctively, but the girl moved with me as if she wanted me to hit her. Trying to avoid her, I jerked the wheel and lost control of the car. The back of the vehicle started skidding, and we ended up crashing onto the gravel shoulder. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but the passengers were screaming nonstop. They called me an idiot and told me I had no business driving. I tried to calm them down and eventually convince them to get back in the car so I could finish the trip. They were still angry but agreed, though they warned me they'd report me to Uber for reckless driving. All I wanted was to drop them off and go home. The drive back was surprisingly quiet, and I was so exhausted I barely remember arriving home or getting into bed. I fell asleep instantly. What happened afterward was even more disturbing. My girlfriend, who lived with me, started saying she heard a little girl's voice in the apartment when I was gone. At first, I didn't take it seriously, but one early morning I heard it too. It sounded like the girl was chatting, laughing, and playing with a friend. The sound echoed clearly throughout the house. My parents had lived in places with odd presences and always insisted the paranormal wasn't such a big deal. But that voice chilled me to the bone. One night, the same girl I'd seen on the road appeared in our bedroom. I saw her standing there, watching my girlfriend and me. That was when I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment. That night, I heard her voice in my dreams, getting closer and closer, until I could almost feel her presence. I woke up with a jolt, and when I opened my eyes, there she was, standing in front of us, smiling. She wasn't demonic, just pale. But her smile was deeply unsettling. The worst part was that the moment I looked away, she vanished. My girlfriend and I tried to sleep after that, but the appearances became more frequent. That's when we decided to move. Luckily, our lease was ending in September, so we took the opportunity to find a new place. After moving, the apparition stopped, and it seemed like the girl hadn't followed us. However, the landlord from our old apartment later told us he still hadn't been able to rent the place. Several people who had gone to see it asked about the little girl hiding under the stairs. Something about that place was clearly wrong, and the mystery of the girl was never solved.